and welcome back to game 2. We're in for another doozy here, for another 20-minute marathon out between these control matchups here. Michael's 1-0 up against Ross. Let's talk a little bit about the sideboarding from both of these players.
I think that from Ross you're going to see dispels, negates, and he's going to bring in his extra cannon and an extra etherling. We might also see renounce the guilds if he's worried about some of Michael's multicoloured planeswalkers, but I'm not too sure if that's going to be too relevant to him. From Michael's side, we're more than likely going to see at least his duresses and negates come out of the board. He may bring in Liliana of the Veil as well, but again, mixed reward in this matchup really. So I would say that Ross definitely has etherling advantage in this matchup now. It's just a case of whether he can make it stick and win.
But looking at their main decks, how many sort of semi-dead cards do each of them have?
Well, from Ross's side, he'll definitely take out his 2 Pillar of Flames. He probably takes out his Turn and Burns as well. Might be a couple of other cuts he can make here and there, so he can certainly take out 6 cards. He can certainly take out. In Michael's deck, he'll want to take out the dead weights. He will probably also want to take out Warp Physique as well. So we've got 5 cards there that he can take out, and there's maybe 1 or 2 other cards like Ultimate Price he can take out as well. So again, he's going to have sort of the 5 or 6 cards that he wants to take out.
Is Ross opening himself up to sort of maybe an early Lingering Souls going all the way?
I don't think so. I think Ross may very well keep his Supreme Verdicts in for that exact reason. It really depends how many cards he wants to sideboard. If he's really worried about Lingering Souls, he does have his Ecstatic Aster in his board, but that seems a little bit narrow.
Michael seems to have charmed his way through the first couple of turns.
Yep, he's on all charms all the time, and Ross is also cycling through his deck, and that's pretty much what these decks want to do in the first few turns.
Unsurprisingly, the only permanents on the board are lands.
Yep. For those of you who think that pure control's dead in standard, look what you're looking at.
We see the Cavern there from Ross.
Given Ross has got 2 caverns, because he's got another in hand, he might put the first one on either Wizard or Human, just so that his Snapcaster Mages will always resolve. Although the one thing in a burn-heavy deck, the caverns can sometimes be a bit of a pain, because they're not a coloured source of mana, apart from for your creatures.
So there's some burn to the face from Ross.
Yep.
Cavern number 2.
Yep.
So now he's got all the creatures in his deck covered.
Yep. Thank you to our spotter. And Michael's going to request the ability to draw some cards. Neither side's going to have access to slaughter games in this, so Sphinx's Revelations are going to be flying, you'd expect, in this matchup.
Certainly against decks like this, slaughter games is devastating. I know typically a lot of the time you want to be naming Sphinx's Revelation.
Against these decks, definitely. Although, against Ross's deck, you can make an argument for naming Etherling. And in fact, that might be the first thing that you name.
Name Etherling, save your Dissipates for the burn, and that's pretty much game.
In a Grixis deck, yeah, but Grixis haven't been playable in standard for a while. But Jund has such problems dealing with Etherling that I think that it just has to name it first up. And there's Sorin, so we've got the old Sorin Lingering Souls going here. I think that Ross is going to, yeah, he's going to syncopate Sorin there. The last thing he wants is Sorin embleming and those Lingering Souls tokens being a real pain from this point here.
So Ross is not going to see any resistance this turn from Michael.
Nope, so it's what can he land? Assemble the Legion is what he can land. That is a pretty devastating card in a control matchup.
So tell us a little bit about what Assemble the Legion does.
Assemble the Legion's an enchantment. During your upkeep you put a counter on it and then put that many 1/1 soldier tokens with haste into play. So it's just going to produce creature after creature after creature.
And as we know, typically in these matchups, enchantments isn't really anything players can deal with.
And Michael does have access to Detention Sphere, but whether he... but it is a one of, I think. And, well, Michael says, okay, if you want it to be like that, let's race. And he lands his own Aetherling. And in this situation, Aetherling is going to be able to quite easily race the Assemble. So it's a case of whether Ross can hold off the Aetherling long enough for the Assemble to do its work. But the important thing that we have to remember here as well is that Ross's deck does have quite a decent amount of reach, whereas Michael's deck can only kill you with what's on the board.
I think you find the important thing here is that Ross has actually got his tokens.
Yeah, he does have genuine tokens for Assemble the Legions, which is it's a classy move. But then again, Ross does have a pretty much all foil deck as well, so he's
Not foil tokens, though.
Don't think they even exist, although they probably could be made if you wanted to. So we've entered the thinking part of the game.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly the game sort of descends into aggression. Both players starting to run out of counter spells and realising they're going to have to actually do something at some point.
Yeah, it generally turns into when one person makes an aggressive move, the other replies back, and then all of a sudden you get a bit of a free for all. One card that would really work for Michael here is Vault of the Archangel if he could find it. I think that would put him just completely out of sight at this point.
The Ross goes all the way down to 8.
Which, as we know, is within one shot of an Aetherling, so...
Michael's going to want to leave him, say, 2 blue up at all times, just to be able to bounce that Aetherling back.
And there, in fact, is Detention Sphere from Michael Maxwell. And Ross is going to negate that.
Certainly in this matchup, negate is one of the best counter spells you can draw.
Yep.
Gets everything relevant.
Well, apart from Aetherling. Is that one card left from Michael now? So he's pretty much saying this Aetherling's what I got. But considering he's got a couple of blue mana left open, that Aetherling might be all he needs.
Ross is maybe having to think whether he's wondering whether that's a counter spell in Michael's hand or not.
And the other thing he's got to wonder here is how he can race. And I think he's just going to lose this race, so it's got to be burn and drawing cards. Sphinx's Revelation for 3, that's a decent start. Puts him out of range of the Aetherling for another turn. And yeah, it was a negate from Michael though. He was thinking, I believe, when we were looking at the Detention Sphere, he was thinking about whether he wanted to counter back in order to get rid of the Assemble the Legion. That Wall Eater's Helix Ross has just drawn. That's a pretty spicy one. Alright, it's turn and burn. But again, that keeps the Aetherling at bay for another turn. I think he just needs to buy 1 or 2 turns for those Assemble tokens to do their work.
And he's got to hope that Michael doesn't draw anything himself.
It's true, but I mean the Esper deck's sort of, it's about just under half lands, and it's, a lot of counter spells that don't actually do anything. So when there's a board state going on, so Michael does have a lot of draws that don't really help him.
And you don't really mind people taking the time over these kind of decisions.
No. The one area that might come into relevancy here is that Michael does have one more Sphinx's Revelation in his deck than Ross does.
We haven't seen any snapcasts off Ross at all this game.
No. Don't know if he's holding one. He might actually be holding one. I think that's a snapcaster. It's kind of hard to tell with the way that Ross foils out all his cards, because all these blue cards end up looking the same in his hand.
So Ross now has two different ways of buying himself a turn. He can either go and target that Eastland with enough burn to kill it, or he can snapcaster and Sphinxes for 4.
Yeah, I don't think he's got... If he had a War Leader's Helix in his bin, he'd be able to really put some pressure on there. Really having a good think about how he can play around that Aetherling though, isn't he?
Feel free to fast forward this video if it's getting a bit tedious for you.
I think that Ross's plan at the moment, he might be working out when he wants to turn and burn the Aetherling as well. Just trying to think a couple of turns ahead.
Well, Michael's out of cards at this point.
So I think he probably wants to turn and burn on upkeep. Just to make sure that Michael can't just randomly draw a counter spell off the top and win.
Yeah, there's no reason to let the guy draw a card.
And there's no point in Ross keeping tokens back either, because he can't block any of Michael's creatures, so it's just a case of what does Ross need and what's his action plan at this point in order to stay alive. So yeah, that's a good start.
Taking Michael down to 14 here.
Yep. The other option that Ross, of course, has is that he could snapcast a mage that Sphinx's Revelation during Michael's upkeep. And again, that puts him out of range of the Aetherling for that turn, puts a little bit more pressure on the board in the form of the snapcaster mage, and gets him 3 more cards deep. I think that his plans do not revolve around that Searing Spear. It's really dependent on what he's planning to do. Yep. He just says go. Is he going to let Michael draw a card? He is. And it's a duress from Michael. So I think what we're going to see at this point is Ross emptying his hand and leaving himself with a Snapcaster Mage in hand. Well, a little bit risky of Ross letting it go to a turn like that, but...
Because you're definitely casting a spell that turn, right?
I mean, the other thing that we can think about is that if Michael does go for the kill with Aetherling, making it 6-3, Ross can actually use the Searing Spear to make the Aetherling phase out then, so...
Or just draw 4 cards.
There was a lot of lines Ross could have had there.
He could have Sphinx's Revelation, drawn some cards to put him above lethal, then untapped, burn the flyers, and save the other burn spell for the Aetherling on the next turn.
Oh, he can't burn all the flyers.
Depends what he draws.
Yeah, true. But I think at this point he'd probably rather go to Michael's face and just race that way. Because if he can, because next turn.
Let's assume that Ross goes down to 3 off the Aetherling after gaining some off the Sphinx's Revelation. If he then burns one of the spirits and then sort of deals with the Aetherling's attack on the very next turn, he'll go to 2 on the turn after, and then that'll be 9 or 10 1/1 soldiers coming back at Michael the turn after that. So He only needs 2 more attacks.
Yeah, so he's Searing Spears Michael. Puts him on 9. And shows him the Snapcaster Mage, so it's like nice duress. So I believe Ross is just going to take 2, is he? Or is Michael going to leave back the spirits to block? I think whether Michael blocks or not, he's dead in 2 turns anyway to that Assemble Allegiance, so...
Well, he has to think about the total amount of damage his Aetherling can do in 1 turn attacking. And then he has to think whether those spirits...
Okay, so he's made the spirit, so he's just gone on D for this turn. And Ross is now going to put 3 more soldiers into play. And what did you draw, Mr. Silcock?
Well, soldiers have to swing.
They don't have to, but they if Ross has got plans on winning this game, they probably do have to go in. Yep, in they go.
They definitely have to swing.
Yeah, and Michael at this point has to. He's got to block, otherwise he'll be in burn range if he lets that damage through. So he trades off all his spirits, and we're at 8 each.
One of Ross's spirits bashes into the Aetherling. Soldiers bashes into the Aetherling as well.
Looks like Ross drew land there, so... And same idea here, his plays probably during Michael's upkeep, Snapcaster Sphinx's Revelation. I mean, he can do it now as well, it's not really... it doesn't really matter which way he does it, but... yeah, his plan is Snapcaster, Sphinx's Revelation, hope to draw a burn spell of any description in the top 5 cards of his library, or a Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, he's going to do it now. Snapcaster Mage into Sphinx's Revelation. He's going to draw 4 cards. Puts him up to 12 and Michael down to 8. So Ross has to brick pretty hard here for Michael to win this game. The more eagle-eyed of you there will have noticed that Ross did brick pretty hard on that Sphinx's Revelation. That was 4 lands that just came off the top of Ross's deck.
If Michael has no play here, all he can do is attack and then sort of recast the Aetherling.
Yeah, I think that's going to be his... yeah, he's just looking at what Ross can potentially do here to hurt him. I think he's going to... Yeah, he's going to do the max damage with Aetherling. He's going to come in for 8. So in case Ross... I mean, if Ross has War Leader's Helix, he's dead pretty much anyway. But... yep, shows the land. So... Ross puts in another 4 soldier tokens. So Michael's not facing lethal combat damage here. So it all depends what comes off the top of Ross's deck. I think if Ross had a burn spell, he'd have done it by now. And Ross reveals 5 land.
So Michael takes this game down 2-0 and goes on to the semi-final.